one about the guy in the mask.
Okay. There's this girl named Lori, high school student, honor roll, shy around boys. She got this job, babysitting a couple kids. It was supposed to be $20 for pizza and table and long talks on the telephone with her friends who were supposed to also be babysitting. She wasn't one really to listen to a lot of radio or to turn on the news on television, so she hadn't heard about the escaped maniac from the nearby institution, the insane asylum. It was Halloween night, and she didn't know that he was coming home. Halloween Kills is the 12th chapter in the enduring franchise known as Halloween. A franchise that started with a revolutionary film in 1978 that captured the imagination of an entire generation of horror fans. Deservedly a modern classic, not a perfect film, but a great one. The series has been on a decline for a long, long time. If you've watched this series of videos, you know that as I've gone on, I've had to search harder and harder for actual storytelling techniques to discuss. As the series has gone on, it's become really clear that these films are being made just to satisfy an audience. It's a financial concern. And there's not a problem with that. I love exploitation films, which are made to make a buck. What's happened with this series is it has become so self-referential that the stories always seem lame. There's such an attempt to just nudge us on the shoulder and say, hey, do you remember this from that movie? That the story never really moves forward. Halloween Kills is probably the best example of this. It really is going to prove to be one of those chapters where if you remove it entirely from the trilogy it's set in, not much changes. Having said that, obviously there has to be some spoilers as I discuss this movie. But again, this is not a review. What I'm doing here is pulling back the storytelling mechanics so we can talk about how this movie is portraying the events in a way to get a reaction out of you. Or how it fails to do so. So Halloween Kills had to follow a fairly weak chapter that was nevertheless very popular. From a storytelling standpoint, that's always going to be difficult. This isn't a case like Empire Strikes Back, where you're following a strong film that really satisfied with the audience and expanding that world. This is simply playing out what the previous flawed film already set in motion. It goes in some places that might surprise you, but never really knows what to do with them. We have to talk a little bit about one of the most basic concepts of storytelling, which is your passive versus your brute force storytelling. Brute force storytelling is not a bad thing. Sometimes it's portrayed as such, but it can be used very effectively and as a shorthand for having to stretch a film or a story out till ends that would make it less palatable. So what it is when the story tells you something as fact and then plays out that concept. It does nothing to tell you why this fact is true. It just is. A great example of this would be at the end of Alien, a film I love. At the end of Alien, they set the self-destruct, and the ship's onboard computer mother just simply intones, 10 minutes and we'll be past the failsafe. And then when that time goes past, she tells you, hey, you got 5 minutes to get to a minimum safe distance. I might have those times wrong. I really don't care. I'm not going to go check it out. There's no way to really validate why this would be. I mean, if you really think about it from any kind of a safety standard or even just a intellectually intelligent standard, no computer system would ever be devised that it had a hard stop of how long you had to turn it off or how much time it was going to give you to get to a safe distance, especially not in those narrow timelines they give you. It just doesn't make any sense, right? These are arbitrary timelines created to give the audience a sense of urgency. However, at that point in Alien, it's really necessary for the audience to feel a strong ramping up and feel that tension, because the monster itself is already really stealing the show as far as generating a lot of anxiety. Now, if you don't get away from it within a time period, well, you're gonna lose. That kind of anxiety building can be a very strong facet in horror films. So brute force storytelling is sometimes very effective. It doesn't really make sense, but it doesn't betray sense either, because there would be an amount of time before you couldn't turn off the failsafe, I guess, even if that time was simply because the ship exploded. And the computer would definitely tell you how long you had to get out of the blast radius, right? So even though the numbers are arbitrary, the logic is still in place. So done right, brute force storytelling can just be an effective way to tell a story. Natural storytelling would be the opposite. A good example of natural storytelling would be at the end of Jaws, where for the third act, there's no ticking clock. But because they tried to drag the shark in, the engines have exploded, and now the three men on the Orca are just drifting in the water, waiting for the shark to attack. That's very different. There's no arbitrary timelines. You're not told any information that you need to keep in the back of your mind for that anxiety to build. Instead, you simply have to watch and wait, and the situation itself is so tense because it seems so bleak and hopeless. Okay, so Halloween Kills is full of brute force storytelling. We're constantly told things, and they play those ideas out. Like I just stated, though, that can still be effective. The problem here is that there is no attempt at a through line to any of this. Ideas are just presented and played, presented and played. It's not building to any means, and there's no reason, in most cases, for the brute force storytelling to even be there. Let me give you an example. We're told that Michael Myers' killing spree is leading directly to his house, right? Okay. Well, that makes a sort of sense, right? In the confines of this movie, I guess sure. But let's not forget, in the original film, which is still canon, Michael does go home. And then he goes and terrorizes babysitters. So why wouldn't he do something similar this time? Why lead back to the house? It doesn't really have to be that way. The film has just designed itself that way to seem like it has a direction. Because truthfully, this film doesn't have a direction. It's just playing out a scenario that would follow the previous film. Now, you may wonder if we're constantly being directed to what the current scene is all about. You know, the other escaped lunatic shows up at the hospital. Why? Because he shows up at the hospital, right? He's hurt, but presumably he's been in an insane asylum. How he knows to get to the hospital? I don't know. He just gets there, right? It's setting up that whole, oh, look how crazy the town is now. Michael Myers has completely made them all batshit crazy. So they're going to force this poor, sympathetic madman who just wanted to steal a car to jump out a window. Well, okay. But again, they haven't backed it up with anything. It's just something that happens so they can play out their scene. And they're going for the madness of crowds metaphor. It's not even subtle in this. And in fact, there's so much weird pratfall humor in the sequence that you gotta think that they would realize that they were way off the mark and just went with it anyway. People are falling downstairs and kicking people as they like dive over them as if it's a heavy metal show in 1989. The movie constantly is setting up scenarios just to play them out. But the plot, well, what plot is there? Michael Myers kills a lot of people on his way home? Is that it? I mean, there's lots of dressings. We follow Laurie Strode in the hospital, and her completely ridiculous stabs herself with morphine and is then able to dress and go out and knee a guy in the groin and climb stairs. I mean, come on. It's ridiculous, right? And maybe if the film had decided to be very cartoonish, like a Marvel movie, this would have worked. But here, where they want it to feel gritty, it's just, my God, right? But because they've set up that ticking clock, which in this case is, hey, the crazy guy's in there, and all the town people think he's Michael Myers. Looks like Sam Kinison, but he's probably Michael Myers to them. Doesn't make a lick of sense. Let's play out as the clock ticks down to the end and the climax of that scene, which in this case is him plunging to his death, and we get that money shot of his brain splattered on the concrete. The problem with making a film like this is that it's not very satisfying. If you look at the original film, it's sleek, its intentions are clear, and it is very much a cone. We start wide and we get small. So we start with like views of the entire town. Laurie's walking town. She's delivering keys for realtors. And we keep widowing down both in size and scope to 2 houses, to 1 house, to a closet. It's a very streamlined, very efficient film that does not get sidetracked. This film, on the other hand, gets sidetracked constantly because it keeps hitting us with these brute force storytelling beats, playing them out, going to the next. It's almost like sketch comedy. And comedy and horror are very similar in that it's all about setups and payoffs, right? So in this film, for instance, setting up that Hawkins stopped Loomis from shooting Michael should pay itself off, right? Well, it should, right? But it doesn't. Because rather than tell that streamlined story, they set it up and just gets lost in the weeds. Sidelining Jamie Lee Curtis for this film was probably an inevitability because there was nothing more for the character they set up in the first film to do. There's no arc to be had. The arc in the first film, I did not agree with what they did with the character, but it's there. I think it's weak, I think it's underdeveloped, and I think it's pretty hackneyed. But at least it was an arc. Here, the character has nothing. She's just fixated on the idea that they gotta kill Michael. Which everyone seems to be fixated on the idea that you gotta kill Michael. Evil dies tonight, right? They say it about 40 million times. Problem is, if that's the goal of the film, why are we not setting up every beat in the story to that end? Because we don't. If the story is about Michael going home, which, hey, there's an idea. Take the tagline of the first film and make it utterly true, right? Well, then the climax of the film should be Big John and Little John. And maybe the lynch mob meeting them there. But it's not. The lynch mob itself is a bizarre thing. They all converge at the hospital at a point for what reason? Not clear. Not clear at all. You tell me that they have to deliver one person to the hospital, so they all go there? Except for, Lonnie and the 2 kids he's hijacked? One which is his kid. I guess he can hijack that kid. I don't know. Doesn't make sense. But we need that final sequence to play the way it does. So, yeah. Everyone goes to the hospital. Why? It even betrays what Tommy tells them to do earlier in the film. He says, stay vigilant, spread out and look for him. They don't do any of that. The trap they set for Michael doesn't make any sense, really, that you're relying on way too many things to happen. And it doesn't even make any sense because if you have that many people, you all rush the house. You have the same advantage as setting that trap. So, ultimately, this is a film that decided on a structure that basically is a bunch of cul-de-sacs. It has a bunch of vignettes strung into a film. It has no positive reinforced direction. And probably worst of all, I hated all the characters. Absolutely everyone. I don't know who was supposed to come off as sympathetic in this movie, but no one did. So, is it the worst in the series? From a structural standpoint? No, actually it's not. It has many of the problems that Curse of Michael Myers has, the sixth film. They're more apparent here, simply because I think we live in an age where our storytelling techniques are all based on that cable TV model, to which this film really does look like one of those shows. It kind of amplifies that storytelling technique is so lame. There's not a natural storytelling moment in this film where something plays out because it should play out. And even things that could be clever, the photograph of the Johns, which then Michael arranges the bodies to match it, but it's kind of a grisly mirror image of it. That kind of should be like the discovery of Judith Myers' gravestone above Annie's body. Or is it Linda's body? It's someone's body. I'm very tired. But it doesn't really play that way because those characters have done nothing but spout one-liners since they were introduced. As do way too many characters in this film. If they're not decrying that evil must die tonight, they're making dumb jokes, none of which land. The first couple in the first house that Michael invades for no reason whatsoever, wow, they just keep telling jokes. Even oh, there's a big guy in the house. Why is he here? Who cares? It's just lame. Like, this is not even good, like, Saturday Night Live sketch humor. I don't know who thought it was funny. I don't know who thought relieving tension before the scare was even going to be effective. I don't like dumb humor in horror to begin with, but at least put it in the right place, which is a big scare and then relieve the humor. But if you relieve the humor first and then expect us to be scared at a brutal kill or two, I just passively watched the whole film, not caring about the characters, thinking the setups were transparent. These were the reddest of red shirts or banana hitchhikers I've ever seen in a film. Now, nothing to do with storytelling, but I will say it's a handsomely shot film for a modern film with that cable TV style. It has a sense of style to it. Not a style that I always agreed with, but some shots are pretty cool. Nothing's ever iconic, but it hangs together. It looks like a time and a place. It's a little bright for me. It all has a little bit of that digital crispness to it that, yeah, it's not my thing. I could forgive it that, though, if the story itself were a whole lot more compelling and a whole lot more consistently told. Probably my biggest problem with this film, above and beyond structure and unlikable characters, is the dialogue. And I know this is the choir out there. Even the people who are championing this film all hate the dialogue, right? But it can't be overstated. This is some really bad writing. I am tempted to say that this was an intentional move because I cannot believe that lines like, "Every time someone is afraid, the boogeyman wins," were written in any kind of a serious, dramatic attempt. Now, that has to be parody. It has to be. Even the Evil Dies Tonight, which directly contradicts some of the existing series mythos, including the first film, which again is canon. I don't know what to say. I think drunk with success off of the first film's popularity and money-making, they thought they could do no wrong. They thought people wanted a bloodbath. They thought people appreciated the, I got peanut butter on my penis joke of all the minor characters in the first film, so they amplified it. Again, like we said at the beginning, it's kind of just them chasing who they think the audience is rather than telling a story. So, ultimately, this is a big miss for me. It's not the worst film in the series. It's not actually even close to the worst film in the series. I don't like either the Rob Zombie films or Resurrection. I hate to say it, guys. I don't like Curse much either. I know a lot of you do. ultimately, it lands right in line with 2018 for me. I could go back and forth about which is a better or worse film, but they're really not worth your time. See it once, because I know it's kind of like looking at an eclipse. I can tell you not to do it, but you're going to do it. Just wear some eyewear, and what I mean by that is go in realizing that we're getting a later sequel in a franchise that's gone on too long, that clearly has nothing to say, and frankly doesn't care if it insults you with the worst dialogue and worst characters of the franchise. It doesn't care. If you want bloody murders, they're here. If you want a guy wearing a William Shatner mask, it's here. If you want callbacks to films in the franchise, oh God, they're there. At this point, we're as far away from the original John Carpenter film as we possibly can get. All I can hope is that the title of the next film is true. But it won't be.